Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing at Marseille-Vence Airport in a few minutes. Please fasten your seatbelts and raise your shelves. It's 2:05 p.m., and the outside temperature is 13 degrees Celsius with a slight westerly wind. Please remain seated until the aircraft has stopped. Thank you. Callie is about to embark on a new adventure, moving to Provence for 18 months to work for a luxury hotel group. The assignment is to develop the Western identity by planning changes in the hotel and applying the group's working methods. Callie has worked in North America for 6 to 12 months and is now entrusted with the management of an establishment in the United States. After studying at a Swiss hotel school, Callie was hired by the American-Canadian group Western. She arrives in a rural valley, which is different from her usual lifestyle and may require time to adapt. Miss Callie Cadell, a consultant sent by Western Hotels, enters the immaculately white lobby with marble-like carpets and armchairs. She is greeted by two receptionists in black suits, who inform the manager of her arrival. The young woman in front of her looks worried and curious, as she usually feels stressed when someone comes to the office. However, Callie is not bothered by this, as she is considered a superior and keeps a certain distance from her colleagues. A tall, slender man with brown hair and deep blue eyes approaches her, causing her to feel under a spell. She was welcomed by Mr. Ricard, who was delighted to meet her and welcome her to their home. Callie tries to regain her senses and grabs the hand he holds out to her. "We have a lot of work ahead of us. I suggest that we go around the hotel together so that you can get a first glimpse of the place." Callie had vainly hoped that he would just greet her and maybe escort her to her room, where she could finally take a shower and fall asleep. Apparently, this would not be the case. She was going to have to go around with the manager before hoping to get a little R&R. Fortunately, the guide was charming. Callie reprimanded herself internally for this new thought. This man was going to be her closest collaborator in the coming months. It would be a very bad idea to develop even the smallest interest in him, especially since he was most certainly married. However, at present, his left ring finger is stripped of any alliance. They started the tour with the gourmet restaurant, then the kitchen, meeting rooms, offices, staff cafeteria, and laundry room. Whether on the public side or behind the scenes on the employee side, no place was spared her. However, she still had not seen a single guest room in the establishment. Monsieur Ricard introduced Callie to a young brunette woman who must have been about her age, and despite her strict suit, she was immediately friendly to Callie. "Miss Cadell, I present to you Danielle Allard, our housekeeper. Danielle has worked for the hotel for many years. She knows all our secrets. She's also a local girl. She knows the region like her pocket." "Pleased to meet you," she said, holding out her hand to Callie for an energetic handshake. "If you need anything, don't hesitate. We are pleased to have you with us." "Yes, very happy," adds Monsieur Ricard, sending her another of his ultra-bright smiles. This visit was very nice, but it's high time she saw the famous guest rooms. Callie then tried a roundabout approach. "Miss Allard, could you just show me around a few guest rooms and show me your work and that of your team?" "Well," she began, embarrassed, glancing at her boss, "that will have to wait another day because we are full today. We have rented all the rooms for New Year's Eve, and most people have extended their stays until tomorrow. But of course, Danielle will be happy to show you all of this as soon as possible." "Well, I think I'll just see the room where I have to sleep tonight then," Callie replied, a little disappointed, even if it could wait until the next day. "On this point, we have a slight problem," he admitted, embarrassed, scratching his neck. "The head office had only informed us of your arrival for tomorrow, so unfortunately, we don't have a room available for you this evening." It took her a second to realize what he was telling her, and when she did, she felt like she had been stabbed to death with a chisel. All hope of showering in the next 30 minutes was dashed, and with it, the rest of the enthusiasm associated with her arrival there. "But where will I stay until then?" Callie tried not to seem too desperate, even if she felt she had all she could stand. "Maybe I have a solution," said Danielle timidly. "I live 2 kilometers from here, and I'm finished in half an hour. Miss Cadell could stay in my guest room tonight. If it suits her, of course," she hastened to add. At the time, Callie could have kissed her. She gave Danielle her best smile and replied, "That would be great if you don't mind, and please call me Callie." And so, half an hour later, Callie was at Danielle Allard's home. Technically, a house. It was more like a large farm with a large family living together. The stone building seemed to have been enlarged over the centuries. "The property belongs to my family," Danielle told her. After she showered, Callie took a few things out of her suitcase without settling in. After all, it would only be a night or two. They went to the dining table, and Danielle served them a glass of red wine each. Their conversation was natural. They first talked about work. She liked hers, and it showed. According to her, the atmosphere at the hotel between employees was rather pleasant. Monsieur Ricard was a demanding but fair boss. He was particularly attentive to the work of the housekeeper and the hotel cleaners, apparently unable to bear the slightest speck of dust. She asked Callie questions about her family. "There wasn't much to say. I was an only child. My father owned an import-export business, which he inherited from his father. He had fallen in love with one of his employees, my mother. When I was born, she raised me, dividing her time between my education and the business. We often accompanied my father on his trips, at least when the school calendar allowed, so I had already traveled the 5 continents. I would say a normal childhood, in a somewhat privileged setting." "And how do you manage to live with all your family next door?" Callie asked. "You know, that's all I know. I grew up with my grandparents, uncle, aunt, and cousin who lived around us. I did live alone for 3 years during my studies in Paris, but I missed them. It's true that at times they are a bit intrusive, and that they get involved in things that don't concern them, but it's also great to be able to visit them whenever I feel like it. If I'm not in good spirits, I go down for a coffee with my grandparents, or I go to see my parents." "I suppose it must have its advantages," Callie said, without much conviction. Danielle got up and began to clear the table. Callie followed her with the rest of the dishes. Later, Danielle offered to be Callie's roommate for the duration of her stay, and Callie accepted. The next day, after a quick breakfast, they headed for the hotel. Danielle started her shift a little earlier than the time Callie used to go to work, but she was dependent on Danielle to take her for the moment. She didn't have much choice. Anyway, it allowed her to see the organization of the breakfast service and to follow Danielle in her work. Danielle continued the task started by her boss the day before, introducing Callie to the people she hadn't yet met. It was a constant stream of names to try and remember. The big advantage of their profession is that, in general, the staff always have their first name discreetly affixed to a small tag with the Western Hotel's logo and worn, uniform or not, at the level of the heart. Around 9 o'clock, when she was at the hotel restaurant, the customers seated for their breakfast stopped their spoons in their tracks. The conversations were interrupted for a few seconds, and each one checked the proper shape of her hair, highlighting her best assets or her best profile. Hugo Ricard, the hotel manager, had just entered, and the least that can be said is that it didn't go unnoticed. Callie pleaded guilty herself at that moment. She no longer heard a word from the room service manager. She was only interested in the man resembling Henry Cavill, who advanced with a sure and almost feline step towards her. He smiled, and Callie realized that this gesture was intended for her when she saw some evil glances in her direction. She couldn't blame them. Any woman would cut off a finger to attract the attention of a man like Hugo Ricard. Well, not the left ring finger, for obvious reasons. He stopped right in front of her. He was close-shaven, and the smell of his aftershave or cologne filled her nostrils. "So, this is where you're hiding," he smiles. "Hello, Callie." They worked hard all day, only pausing for half an hour for lunch. She met the various department heads and settled in her new office. So, when Danielle knocked discreetly on the door at the end of the afternoon, she hadn't noticed it pass so quickly. "Can I take you home?" "Yes, thanks. I still have thousands of things to do, but they'll wait until tomorrow. I'm a little tired." As Danielle told Callie the day before, she introduced her to her family. The first month in Luberon passed like lightning. Between work and Callie settling in, the 24 hours in a day often seemed insufficient. At the hotel, she was busy. She was gradually able to make a place for herself on the team, even though most of them welcomed her with great reluctance. First, she wanted to question their ways of working, which have sometimes been fixed for several decades. Second, she had the fault of being a foreigner, and this point, for some, was unforgivable. Fortunately, some of her colleagues seemed to value her, and saw her work as beneficial for the hotel, instead of thinking that she was responsible for the disruption of their little habits. Hugo Ricard appreciated her work and had let her hear it several times. She wasn't insensitive to his charms. He too seemed to find her to his liking, although he had not, for the moment, attempted any approach other than professionally. The problem was that she wasn't the only one who noticed it. After work, Callie happily goes back to their apartment on the farm. Danielle was a bit of a messy roommate, yes, but always in a good mood. Her family had adopted Callie, and during her absences, because they didn't necessarily work on the same days or at the same hours, it wasn't uncommon for one of them to invite Callie for coffee. Callie had finally met Danielle's cousin, Vincent. He had examined Callie from head to toe with an impenetrable look, even before greeting her. Tall, dark, and not very talkative. He seemed quite mysterious, bordering on a little dangerous. He was a handsome man, with a bad boy side who could have been cured if he had been more smiling. From what she understood, he ran a garage on the road to Apt and worked like a madman. She was almost relieved to know that she wouldn't run into him often. The following Saturday, Callie went to Vincent's garage. He presented her with a small, compact black car that, according to him, had all the qualities necessary for her use. The price seemed right, and Vincent guaranteed her that its previous owner had perfectly maintained it. So, she decided to buy it. One evening, Callie stayed late at the hotel, working. Hugo knocked on her door at around 6 p.m. She had skipped lunch and was surprised by the late hour. "You're still here?" "As you can see," she replied. He dusted the chair in front of her desk, an unnecessary precaution and quite annoying since it was clean, and sat down. "Maybe you should sleep at the hotel. It's dark and it has snowed for most of the day. The roads aren't safe, and there's no shortage of rooms available this evening." "You are certainly right." Callie frowned at the idea of facing the road back. "May I invite you to dinner?" She raised an eyebrow, not understanding his invitation, as he had just said, the roads were snowy. Seeing her questioning look, he added, "At my place. The restaurant is closed this evening, and I doubt that the peanuts from the minibar are enough for you after you skipped lunch." "Ah, yes, that's nice. Thank you," she stammered. What was I thinking about? He wasn't going to invite me on a date in the middle of a snowstorm, and then did I want to? No, actually yes. But she didn't want to admit it to herself. And anyway, it would have been complicated. They were working together. However, she couldn't help but get excited about going to eat at his place. She rushed to the bathroom just to do a quick check on her outfit. Yup, high-level dates. It just wasn't great. We had to rely on the rest. She checked that no piece of parsley had lodged in her teeth. How would it get there? No idea. She hadn't had lunch, and parsley wasn't her favorite meal for breakfast. Faced with the impeccable smile of her colleague, sponsored by the French Association of Oral Hygiene, she had to be flawless. They prepared dinner together. Correction. She kept him company while he cooked. They chatted while eating in a very relaxed way. He told her about his childhood in Paris, about his background, and she told him about hers, her family, and her friends in the United States. They had an excellent Bordeaux and ended the evening. She sat cross-legged on the sofa, with him at the other end, telling his university anecdotes, each funnier than the others. The evening was pleasant, as was the company. Intoxicated by the delicious wine, Callie couldn't help discreetly ogling Hugo. His perfect features, his charming smile, and his shiny hair. She didn't know if he had a serious relationship, and she would be surprised if a girl hadn't already grabbed him. With his gentlemanly manner, he had everything of the ideal son-in-law. Maybe he preferred to play the field after all. On that thought, she'll have another glass of wine. When Callie looked at her watch, she saw that once again she had lost track of time. It was time to take her leave. "I should go back to my room and go to bed," Callie announced, standing up. "I'll walk you to your room." His statement didn't leave room for discussion, so they took the opposite path from the one taken earlier in the evening. Despite her down jacket and the warmth of Hugo by her side, she was shivering. Focused on the fact that she was almost as frozen as a tub of Ben & Jerry's, she didn't see the patch of ice on the path. Her foot slipped, and she felt the rest of her body tipping. She made small, desperate pinwheels with her arms, and, in a final burst of lucidity, clung to the first object under her hand, Hugo's biceps. Hugo lost his balance and fell heavily on the snowy ground, absorbing her fall. She tried to meet his gaze, but a soggy lock of hair blocked her face. She blew on it, a desperate temptation to move it, without success. Hugo's body was then taken by tremors. My God, he was having a seizure, she thought. But then Callie realized that her attractive colleague wasn't on the edge of agony, but rather in the grip of a laugh. Her state went from worry to hilarity in a matter of seconds, certainly due to the release of pressure. One of his hands left her waist and went up to her face to get rid of that notorious lock of hair that separated them. His fingers lightly caressed her cheek as he passed it behind her ear. At that moment, their laughter died. Danielle's words came to her mind. What is wrong with having a little fun? On a whim, and certainly helped by the hard work of the winemakers of the Bordeaux region, Callie took the first step and put her lips on his. I hope you enjoyed watching Captivating the French Hearts. For more epic stories, please subscribe and turn on post notification. Don't forget to like, comment, and share.